The subcommittee is called to order. Today, the subcommittee is meeting to discuss the topic of food safety. Unfortunately, news of unsafe food products has continued to make front-page headlines. The outbreak of E. coli in spinach a few years ago, the outbreak of salmonella in peppers this past summer, and the most recent outbreak of salmonella in peanut butter all emphasize that now is the time for us to act. 9 people have died as a result of this most recent peanut butter outbreak, and hundreds more have gotten sick, and millions of dollars have been lost in sales due to products being recalled. Food safety, or perhaps more accurately, the lack thereof, continues to be one of my top priorities. In every Congress for the last 12 years, I've introduced food safety legislation that aims to bolster the FDA's enforcement and regulatory authority over the food industry. This year, I've collaborated with my colleagues, Mr. Dingell and Mr. Stupak, to introduce a comprehensive FDA reform bill. Many of the food provisions within the FDA Globalization Act build upon concepts and provisions I've put forth in my previous bills, and they emphasize prevention and shifting the responsibility of safe food from the FDA to the manufacturers. What it all comes down to is that it's not the government's duty to make food safe. The companies, in my opinion, should be responsible for the products they make and must be held accountable for that responsibility. It's their job to make their food safe and to implement a plan that will ensure that they achieve that goal. It's the government's job, on the other hand, to set standards for food safety and hold the food industry accountable for meeting those standards through regulatory and enforcement authorities. We must empower the FDA with those authorities so that the agency can effectively prevent problems from ever occurring, rather than simply reacting when something bad has happened. And we must also require manufacturers to put in place the food safety plans to ensure that their products and production lines are safe. But there are other mechanisms aside from food safety plans that companies can implement to ensure the safety of their products. And we will hear testimony this morning from industry experts on the various safety mechanisms companies can implement in order to protect their product lines and keep our nation's food supply safe. We'll also hear about some of the regulatory authorities that the FDA needs in order to ensure that companies are actually implementing and following these preventative mechanisms. And finally, we'll hear from witnesses about the enforcement tools the FDA needs to fulfill its mission of protecting the public health and protecting Americans from harmful products, both in the United States and abroad. I'm looking forward to the discussion today and the information we will glean. We do want to pass food safety legislation rather quickly this year if we can, and so obviously today's hearing will be very helpful in that regard. And I do want to mention that I don't see him, but Congressman Stupak has done an excellent job in the O&I subcommittee in bringing attention to this issue over the last, actually over the last 3 years. He and I and Congressman Dingell have this legislation, but he has done repeatedly had hearings addressing some of the concerns that have led to the legislation. And I now recognize my colleague, Mr. Diehl.
I want to thank Chairman Pallone for holding this hearing as we evaluate concepts that we as policymakers should consider in approaching reform of the nation's food supply at the food safety issue at the Food and Drug Administration. I appreciate the timeliness of this hearing, particularly since my home state of Georgia has itself been under a lot of attention as the consequence of a rogue peanut processing operation in the state that is, as you indicated, contributed to 9 deaths and several hundred Americans being sickened all across our country. But let me be clear. I support giving FDA the resources it needs to ensure our nation's food supply remains safe and reliable for American dinner tables across the country. I believe a modernized approach to risk identification and prevention, particularly through hazard analysis and critical control point HACCP plans, and similar prevention-minded procedures, is a realistic and evidence-based solution to mitigating the hazards in the nation's food supply chain. We must focus on pursuing reforms with public safety protection as a top priority. However, we must do so diligently and methodically to ensure our actions do not cripple small businesses in the food industry across the country. Our nation's food supply needs a great deal of improvement in terms of the safeguards and fallback measures expected of a 21st century food supply chain in the United States. recognizing the need for a risk-based approach to food safety reform. I've joined Representatives Jim Costa and Adam Putnam in co-sponsoring H.R. 1332, the Safe Food Enforcement Assessment Standards and Targeting Act of 2009, Safe Feast Act as it's referred to. This act takes an aggressive yet realistic effort to improve food safety by granting FDA enhanced statutory authority to do its job, as well as require implementation of safety measures to prevent foodborne problems before they even manifest themselves. It is my hope that any legislation that we pass out of this committee is similar to the provisions contained in H.R. 1332. Look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle as we look at concepts that are aimed to improve the safety of America's food supply. Thank you for holding this hearing today. I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses, and I welcome them to this hearing today. Thank you. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Deal. Next is Chairman Waxman. I forgot to mention the work that you did on your previous committee on government oversight on the food safety issues as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. America does not need another deadly outbreak to understand that our food safety system is in desperate straits. We have ample proof of that. This is a bad situation, not just for the American public, but for the food industry itself. We must act now to address the problem, and this hearing today is the first step on that legislative path. Today we'll hear about some of the major concepts that our witnesses believe must be included in a model food safety bill. The FDA Globalization Act of 2009 provides an ideal starting point, and I commend Chairman Emeritus Dingell, Chairman Pallone, Chairman Stupak for their work on this bill. Using this bill as a foundation, this committee will work with the President's FDA to implement some common sense food safety measures that are long overdue. As we move forward, we'll also draw upon the work of Chairman Stupak and Ranking Member Walden, who lead our subcommittee on oversight and investigations. It's clear we need to give FDA some basic authorities that will enable it to do its job. As the Oversight and Investigation hearing illustrated, FDA does not have the authority to routinely access records documenting the steps that manufacturers take to assure safety. FDA also lacks modern and flexible enforcement tools like administrative civil monetary penalties. It's our job to get FDA the resources and authorities it needs to get the job done and to do it well. But with over 300,000 registered food facilities throughout the U.S. and abroad, it's clear we can't rely on FDA alone to prevent foodborne illness outbreaks. Manufacturers must implement preventive systems to stop outbreaks before they occur, and we need to hold them accountable when they fail. Dr. Steven Sundloff, FDA's Director of Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, agreed at our hearing last month that each company in the chain of manufacturing has an obligation to ensure that the ingredients they are using, as well as their final products, are safe for Americans to consume. Related to this, I'd like to announce now that next Thursday, on March 19th, we will hold another investigative hearing that focuses on the companies that purchase these tainted peanuts and why their food systems, safety systems, fail to prevent these deaths and illnesses. We have a challenging job ahead of us, but we also have many reasons to be optimistic. In his budget, President Obama called for over $1 billion for FDA's efforts to increase and improve inspections, domestic surveillance, laboratory capacity, and domestic response to prevent and control foodborne illnesses. I also know that President Obama is committed to naming an FDA commissioner soon, and I look forward to his announcement. The food safety crisis calls for strong leadership at that agency, and we need it now. Let me say a few words about the notion of a so-called single food agency. A lot of good points have been made about the need to improve our fragmented system and ensure that food safety is given appropriate attention by our regulatory agencies. But reorganizing large federal bureaucracies takes a great deal of time, and this is time we do not have when it comes to food safety. We have to act now. We have to concentrate the additional resources we can get at this point on the job at hand. Our first goal should be to address the problems that plague this program where it currently sits. After we finish that job, we can consider whether a reorganization is necessary, and if so, how to go about it. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about what steps we can take to begin this process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back my time.
Thank you, Chairman Waxman. Our ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Barton.
Thank you, Chairman Pallone and Chairman Waxman. As we all know, there are differences between the political parties in Congress, but there are also many similarities. On food safety, there's no daylight between Henry Waxman and Joe Barton, between the Republican minority and the Democratic majority. We both agree it's important. We both agree we need to take a look at the problem in a serious fashion, and we both agree that if necessary, we need to work together to move legislation to fix that problem. This committee, in the last Congress, through the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, held 9 hearings on food safety. And just this past month, as has already been mentioned, we held another hearing on the most recent food safety outbreak, the peanut butter salmonella outbreak. This committee and the various subcommittees have been active on food safety, and we are going to continue to be active. The food safety debate in the past few years has centered on funding additional money for the Food and Drug Administration. Unfortunately, in my opinion, instead of asking the appropriators to give the FDA additional funding, some have wanted to raise the additional money through a pay-to-play fee on food companies. Last Congress, Nathan Deal of Georgia, the ranking member on this subcommittee, and myself wrote the appropriators and asked them to give the FDA additional funds through the appropriation process. The appropriators responded positively, increased the appropriation for the FDA by $150 million in last year's supplemental appropriation bill. We are the authorizing committee, and it's our job to give the FDA the authority to have the tools that it needs to make sure that our food is safe to eat. We must then get industry, consumers, the Food and Drug Administration, and the Congress together to strengthen the food safety system. Last week, I co-sponsored the Bipartisan Safe Food Enforcement Assessment Standards and Targeting Act. That takes up a page, just the name of the thing, which is introduced by Congressman Costa, Congressman Putnam, Congressman Deal, among others, because I think that it's the right approach to food safety. It takes a risk-based, prevention-based approach to fixing the problem. We need to focus on preventing food problems before they occur. One way the legislation I just enunciated does that is by requiring that companies create and properly execute food safety plans. Experts say that if the Peanut Corporation of America had had one, the salmonella outbreak never would have happened in the first place. The Costa-Putnam bill also takes a risk-based approach to food safety. It requires the FDA to focus the resources on high-risk facilities first, where we get the most bang for our regulatory buck. Mr. Chairman, this is an issue that unites consumers and producers. Consumers want to be confident the food they eat is safe. Producers rely on that confidence because without it, their brand means nothing. In fact, it's a negative. There seems to also be a bipartisan and a bicameral support for moving food safety legislation. Again, I say that on the Republican side, we stand united with our friends on the Democrat majority side. We want to outline the problems in hearings like the one we're having today, and if we need a legislative solution, we're prepared to cooperate in preparing that solution. Thank you, Chairman Pallone, again for holding this hearing.
Thank you. Next is the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gonzalez. Thank you. The gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, when the Subcommittee on Oversight met last month to take testimony on the salmonella outbreak, Chairman Pallone, you promised that you would hold this hearing, so I want to thank you and Ranking Member Deal for following up so quickly. In listening to the tragic stories of the families who were here that day and hearing the callousness of the Peanut Corporation executives from the emails that the subcommittee had uncovered, it was clear that there were gaping holes in the food safety system which needed to be closed. In reviewing the testimony, several themes emerged with which I agree. One, that health and well-being of the American public cannot wait any longer for solutions to address our broken food safety system. Two, that the system must be completely overhauled in a manner that prioritizes coordination, resources, prevention, surveillance, accountability, transparency, and response, and that empowers the FDA. And third, that we pay the price for our nation's broken food system, and we pay it in human lives and health, direct and indirect economic costs in the way that citizens, both here and abroad, view products coming from the U.S. So I look forward to the testimony of our outstanding panel and to working to make bills like H.R. 759 law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Gingrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, public health officials estimate that each year 76 million people become sick, 325,000 are hospitalized, and 5,000 die from foodborne illnesses caused by contamination. And of course, the most recent of these incidents in my home state of Georgia sickened more than 677 people in 45 states and caused at least 9 deaths due in part to a breakdown in FDA oversight. We therefore have an important oversight and legislative role in ensuring confidence in the safety of our food supply, and I do commend the chairman for holding these hearings. While I'm pleased to see this committee engaged on such a critical issue as food safety, we must avoid sending mixed signals. If we are trying to build a consensus that the FDA is overworked and lacks on food safety oversight, adding things like tobacco to FDA's responsibilities, I hope will not take away from the very thing we're advocating here today. People understand the dangers of tobacco. There's no safe cigarette. But what they don't understand and they don't expect is a spinach salad or a scoop of peanut butter to kill them or their loved ones. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope that these hearings will help us reach a greater understanding of the breakdowns in the current system as well as the appropriate solutions to safeguard the health and the welfare of all Americans. And I do look forward to working with you in a bipartisan way, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Sarbanes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing and for the work you've been doing on food safety. And also want to salute Chairman Stupak and Chairman Waxman for their work as well, and so many others who have been part of this effort. There's so many obvious negative consequences to not having good oversight of our food supply. Among them, of course, are when there's a severe contamination, which can lead to harm and to death, and we've seen that recently once again. A little less obvious is the low-level contamination that can be broadly distributed across the food supply, but is also certainly the province of those who are supposed to guard our food safety. The third that I'm particularly intrigued with, and I've read some of the testimony and look forward to the witnesses today, is the effect that occurs when there is an outbreak and a crisis and alarm in the public that then causes people to turn away from healthy foods, which of course undermines our overall objective of getting people to eat right in this country. So we've got to make sure we protect the food supply so that we can advance that overall goal. I look forward to the hearing today. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Pitts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you for convening this hearing on a topic that we read about in the newspapers every day, food safety. The ongoing salmonella outbreak linked to the consumption of products containing peanut ingredients from a single firm, Peanut Corporation of America, is only the latest in a string of high-profile food safety-related incidents. The U.S. food supply is widely regarded as among the safest in the world. Nonetheless, as we've just heard, public health officials estimate that each year 76 million people become sick, 325,000 are hospitalized, and 5,000 people die from foodborne illnesses caused by contamination from any one of a number of microbial pathogens. Recent scares about spinach and peppers and peanut butter and other products, both imported and domestic, have led to public confusion about which products are safe and whether the food items they have in their refrigerators and pantries could be contaminated. These instances have also led to a lack of confidence among many Americans in the government's ability to keep them and their families safe from foodborne illnesses. Our constituents must have confidence that when they go to their local grocery store or convenience store, the food they buy is safe and that it has met the highest standards and safeguards of our food safety system. The U.S. food safety system, which includes as many as 15 different federal agencies, collectively administering at least 30 different laws related to food safety, must be modernized to meet the conditions of the 21st century. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today, specifically on the role FDA plays in food safety, on what must be done to prevent or mitigate future foodborne illnesses and outbreaks, what changes must be made to FDA's current practices, and whether FDA's current resources are adequate to accomplish these goals. And I would like to thank all of our witnesses for testifying today. I look forward to your statements. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Chairman Dingell, and thank you for introducing this bill and all your efforts on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding today's hearing on the adequacy of our food safety system. I want to say that this is a most timely and necessary hearing because we have before us one of the finest messes in history. Everybody's busily blaming Food and Drug for the inadequacy of the protection of American consumers. The blame for that lies right here in the Congress and downtown in the executive branch because of the failure of the agencies in the federal government and this Congress to see to it that FDA has, first of all, a good and adequate basic fundamental statute on which they may work, and our failure to see to it that they have an adequate and reliable revenue stream to enable them to do what has to be done. Food safety is long a concern of mine, and today's hearing is very timely and necessary. You have mentioned, and it has been mentioned already, that we have a fine piece of legislation before this committee, which I will mention later. We do. And its enactment could do much to resolve the problems at Food and Drug. There are not only problems with regard to food, but there are problems with regard to pharmaceuticals and devices. And there are severe problems in an uncooperative food processing industry that has done everything it can to obfuscate the matters and to see to it that we don't get legislation. As you know, Mr. Stupak and his sister subcommittee has had some fine hearings. And he's brought folks in here to explain what's going on out there and to have Food and Drug tell us whether they've got the resources. And we've had hell's own time prying the truth out of them. We have a major problem on our hands relating to the safety of the food supply. It's killing Americans. The Government Accountability Office has recognized this when they designated federal oversight of food safety as a high-risk area for the first time in 2007. The Congress has done nothing about this except to talk and to come forward with a lot of wondrous plans like setting up a single agency to administer the business. Now, we have given them some more money, and that has been useful, but we've got a lot more that has to be done. FDA is responsible for regulating 80% of the food supply of the United States, but it is receiving only 24% of the expenditures. And I repeat, as a result of this, people are getting sick and dying. Every year, 76 million people contract a foodborne illness in the United States. About 325,000 of these require hospitalization, and about 5,000 die, according to the Center for Disease Control. So we've got that on our backs and upon our hands. More specifically, in the last 2 years, we can cite just a few events which have occurred. Melamine in infant formula and in milk products coming in from China. Nothing done to stop it. Tainted peppers from Mexico. Harmful seafood and harmful fish from China. E. coli in spinach. That's just a little. And every year we get new information about the Food and Drug's inability to protect the American people. Unfortunately, the theme of a failed food supply system has not receded. We currently find ourselves in the middle of what is possibly the largest food recall in history. And it's costing billions of dollars to consumers and to innocent food processors because Food and Drug could not and did not do its job. We currently find, and we've had hearings, by the way, on that, which read like a joke book. We currently find ourselves with FDA wrestling with a foodborne illness outbreak associated with salmonella, which has been found in peanut products produced by the Peanut Corporation of America, PCA. And because of the outright negligence of this company, more than 2,100 products, from ice cream to dog food, have been recalled. And by the way, the Department of Agriculture can investigate and can inspect dog food manufacturers every year. Food and Drug can't do the same thing for food processors for human beings. Because of the outright negligence of this company, then more than 680 people in 46 states have been sickened. And so far, we know of 9 who have died from these events. And I think we can assume, given the way things have been going, that this is not yet over. What we have found in this instance and in many others is that FDA's funding is woefully inadequate and their authorities are outdated. They have proven to be incapable of protecting our food supply. I commend the President for recognizing the inadequacy of FDA's resources and for proposing increased funding for food safety activities in his budget passage. However, my experience in the Congress has shown me that the only way to adequately address this problem of resources is by ensuring a steady, predictable revenue stream for FDA. I propose to do this by establishing a registration fee for manufacturers so that we can look and see what's coming into this country. And I would note to you, because of Food and Drug's inability to address this problem, that we're finding controlled substances are coming into this country right alongside of other commodities uninspected by Food and Drug or anybody else. This is the only way we can make sure that Food and Drug is able to carry out its responsibilities. In addition to the shortage of resources, we must address the issue of authorities. It is shameful that FDA does not have authority to mandate recalls, to require manufacturers to identify and develop plans to mitigate hazards before they occur rather than after people are sick and dying, and to identify safety questions by having full access to safety records without delay, and to appropriately trace the ability and not only their own ability, but the origin of tainted products. Mr. Chairman, you and I, along with Chairman Stupak, have an appropriate safety solution to our food problems, H.R. 759. And I urge and invite our colleagues to join us in this particular undertaking. As a result of the failure to have Food and Drug given the authority it needs and the resources, people, I repeat, are dying. The Congress is working to address a mess left behind by another industry that has been left to self-regulate. I refer to the banks and the securities industry. And there they are destituting people all across the United States in all kinds of ways, from their 401ks to their retirements to their savings account and to their hopes of the future in their homes and their mortgages. I look forward to our witnesses' testimony today. I apologize for taking so much time, but I hope that this process will shake some folks up so that we'll get some progress that we need in making the American people safe. I thank you and I commend you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be brief. I want to thank the Chairman Emeritus. He is passionate about this. I see my friend Bart Stupak here, and I got to serve on the ONI, had numerous of these hearings. We know the need, and we know we need to move rapidly. I've always been supportive of a risk-based approach. In making sure that the money that's needed goes to where it's needed. And I think we need to focus on that. Preventive, there's a lot of preventive aspects that we can do, like irradiation in a lot of these areas that doesn't affect food quality. I think we identified that, and we ought to help and incentivize movement in that direction. And funding is always going to be an issue. Make sure we fund appropriately, so the money's going to where it's needed. That's why I'm excited about being back on this committee. Mr. Chairman, I think serving with Bart's helped me get up to speed on this issue, and I look forward to be helpful. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Barrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for keeping your promise to stay on this issue until we get something done about it. I can add nothing to the comprehensive statement of the Chairman Emeritus, but as befits my diminutive stature in the picture, I'll focus on something smaller. I know that colleagues of mine are working on more comprehensive legislation, from subjects like increasing the resources and increasing the amount of FDA inspections, to creating a system of traceability, to creating mandatory recall authority. There are a whole bunch of major elements that need to be put in place. I want to focus on something that I think ought to be a part of any comprehensive bill or can stand alone as a genuine contribution to this, and that's a measure to increase the effectiveness of both the sampling and the testing that's done of food. What we need in this country is a system that doesn't give manufacturers the option of knowing what they need to know and when they need to know it, but requires them to know what they need to know when they need to know it, and that provides real-time information, reporting that information at the very same time to an effective regulator of the public interest, so that the public knows what we need to know when we need to know it. I think that would go a long way toward cleaning up what's broken in this system, but we cannot continue to rely on a system that is essentially the honor system that allows folks to use the American people as a population of lab rats to test the food on them first to find out what's wrong with it. That won't work. We've got to be proactive about it, and that's what I hope the witnesses will be able to share with us about today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlewoman from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our witnesses. We are ready to hear from you today, and I have just a couple of thoughts to add to the comments that have been made. The hearings on food safety are not new. I will also say that as we have worked through this process over the last several years, one of the things that we have repeatedly asked you all for is clarification on your internal communications, how you communicate with one agency, one division, knowing what work is being done in another one. It seems as if you continually have stumbles that do harm to the work that you are trying to do. Also, best practices. You seem reticent to talk about best practices and how you address some of the problems that face you all with food safety and with other parts. We know that you have got to change the way you deal with quality control, that is something for the suppliers as well as for you all internally. And we know that you need a reformed review system, that you also need some organizational changes to take place. And now with the Chairman Emeritus in his remarks, which we all agree with much of that, I will differ on one point. I think before you start spending more money, what you need to do is show how you're going to reorganize and how you're going to address the problems that are before us. And thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlewoman from Colorado, Ms. DeGette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank my compadre Bart Stupak for all the work we've been doing in ONI over the last 10 years on these food safety issues. I think that the bill that the Chairman and the Chairman Emeritus and Mr. Stupak introduced is excellent, especially since it includes several issues I've been working on for many years, which is mandatory recall authority for the FDA and also traceability. because we have the ability to do mandatory recall right now. Most people think we have it. And if we had it, perhaps some of those people in this latest peanut butter outbreak would not have died because the FDA would have been able to recall that peanut butter sooner. One thing I will say, two things I will say. The first thing is I think we need to improve the traceability provisions in the bill, and I look forward to working with the chairman on that. The technology exists, and there's no reason we shouldn't be doing it. The second thing is, as well as more resources, we need to give the FDA more authority to obtain the information that they need through subpoena authority and other kinds of authority. And finally, I agree completely with Chairman Waxman when he says that we need to do all of this now, and then after we do it, we need to look at structural changes in the way we oversee our food safety in this country. Congresswoman DeLauro and I have worked for many years on a unitary food safety agency, but that will take time, and time is certainly something we don't have right now, given what is happening with all of these outbreaks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Castor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Stupak, as well. Food safety is vital to the health of all Americans. And many of you know the Government Accountability Office keeps a very short list of major government problems that require significant reform. It's called the high-risk series and includes notorious governmental failures such as the financial regulatory system, maintenance of our roads and bridges. Food safety also is on this high-risk list, and reform is vital. Let me give you one example. Tomatoes from my home state of Florida last year were blamed for a nationwide salmonella outbreak that was eventually traced to jalapeno and serrano peppers from Mexico. In the meantime, the FDA's warning not to consume tomatoes from Florida cost tomato producers at least $100 million. All of the time and effort spent warning consumers about Florida tomatoes only served to delay the solution to the real problem and allow more Americans to get sick. We've got to address the lack of resources, the labyrinth regulatory regime, the lack of federal authority. The problems facing the food safety and oversight are legion, and they're difficult, but they're not insurmountable. So I look forward to the witnesses' thoughtful recommendations today. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Space.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In yielding back, I would just like to thank you and Chairman Stupak and Chairman Dingell for your good work in this area, and look forward to the testimony.
Thank you. The gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing. And you know, it was only a month ago today that, under the tremendous leadership of Chairman Stupak, that we had a hearing in the Oversight Subcommittee on the recent salmonella outbreak associated with peanut products. And at that hearing, I told the tragic story of an elderly woman from my district who died of salmonella poisoning. Sadly, Mr. Chairman, since then, another elderly woman from Northeast Ohio by the name of Nellie Napier has died from salmonella. In fact, her death was announced that day. There have been over 99 cases of salmonella reported in Ohio and 680 nationwide. Now, I know, Mr. Chairman, that you and others have long been working to fix our broken food safety system, and I thank you. I thank Chairman Waxman and Chairman Emeritus Dingell and Ms. DeGette and others. The bottom line, Mr. Chairman, is that Congress needs to act quickly and comprehensively to address the food safety in our country. It's clear that the FDA does not have the current authority or capacity to properly oversee the safety of our food supply. That's why I reintroduced the Protect Consumers Act to give FDA mandatory recall authority. It's a very simple measure, certainly should be part of a comprehensive overhaul, but frankly, I would love to see it moved quickly in its own right if we cannot move the comprehensive bill as quickly as we would like. We cannot sit back and let any more people become ill from food they eat. I look forward to hearing from our panelists today and working with my colleagues to fix our broken food system. And I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Engel.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like unanimous consent to have Mr. Green's remarks entered into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this important hearing today. If there's any good that may come of the Peanut Corporation of America salmonella crisis, it's now clearer than ever that our food safety system is broken and in need of critical reforms. An AP poll last year found that 46% of people were scared that they would get sick from tainted food. And there's a reason for this fear. U.S. foodborne illnesses result in 76 million illnesses, hundreds of thousands of hospitalizations, and up to 5,000 deaths each year. As one of our witnesses astutely pointed out in his testimony, our nation is sustaining deaths equivalent to those that perished in the World Trade Center attack in New York every 6 months. When you think about it in those terms, it just takes your breath away. And yet, we've set up the FDA to fail here. We expect the FDA to ensure the safety of our nation's food supply, but we haven't given it the resources or authority to get the job done. Sure, there are many food companies and facilities that are employing best practices to preserve their own food products, but unfortunately, it's those that don't that cause crippling problems for our public health and economy. This is why it's so important to grant FDA the ability to mandate clear preventative controls, strong traceability, and mandatory recalls within their food safety authority. Mr. Chairman, the costs are clear. I look forward to working with you on a comprehensive food safety reform bill this year. I yield back.
Thank you. Gentlewoman from California, Ms. Eshoo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very important hearing on the issue of food safety, which is so needed. The American people should be able to trust their government to protect them from foodborne illnesses, and right now, to put it mildly, we're not even doing an adequate job. When people are dying or becoming seriously ill as a result of what they ingest in the United States of America that has always had the highest standards, we're really in trouble. And it's an area that, most frankly, I think the Congress has neglected for a long time. So I think that now is the time to address it because the FDA really should be the world's premier food inspection authority. It's an issue that affects everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, where you live in the country, whether you're a youngster or an oldster. God help you if you have ingested something that has not been reviewed. And we live in a global economy, and we have things pouring into our country, and unless it's inspected, then our citizens are placed at risk. I've co-sponsored legislation that Congresswoman DeLauro has offered. I think it's a very good bill. I think that there are good ideas both in this committee and from outside the committee. I think that the system has to obviously be modernized, and I really think that we should separate out food from the FDA. I think we should have a Food Safety Administration. I, for one, am a little tired of running the FDA on user fees. I think we're doing it on the cheap, and as long as we do that, we're going to be plagued with the problems that we're here to discuss today. So I look forward to working with all of my colleagues on this issue. I don't think anyone has a corner on the market of wisdom on it, but I do think that the committee should take into consideration all of the bills that are being introduced on this, because there are very good ideas that are contained in each one. So thanks again, Mr. Chairman, and to the witnesses that are going to testify today, thank you. We know that you will be instructive, we will learn from you, and hopefully we'll pay close attention to you. Thank you.